Welcome back to Mysteries Channel. Today I wanted to talk about a book that I read. It's a fascinating book. It's a very short read and I highly recommend it to anyone. It's called, and it's a long title, but it's called The Smokey Eye God or a Voyage to the Inner World. The book was written in 1910 or published in 1910 and it's the account of Olaf Jansen. Olaf, 95 years old, and he befriends a man who's walking in front of his home. And eventually he tells him an incredible tale. The tale about the beginning of his life and what happened to him and his father when he was younger. Olaf, 2 times before this, told this tale, and both times his life kind of ended up in a shambles. So I imagine that he was very reserved and waited for the right moment near the end of his life so he didn't end up in confinement again. So this is where it is, and this is how it goes. Olaf is a young man, as a young boy, he's Norwegian, and he learns fishing with his father. He goes fishing at the age of 7, and by the age of 19, they're going on fishing expeditions. They're going north of where he lives, and when he is 19 years old, his father decides that he wants to recreate a trip that he had done before. This trip brought him extra profits because he found some tusks on an island. He wanted to go further north than normal and try to get a great find and bring in some extra cash for the family. So he and his father depart from their land. I want to say the year is 1829. 1829. They leave their home and they sail north to Franz Joseph Island. I'll try to find some map pictures so you can see it. But he sails north to Franz Joseph Island, and they bring in a great catch, and the water is good and the skies are great. They're seeing icebergs, but they're in a very small fishing vessel, so this isn't a problem for them. And they decide, you know what, let's keep going north. We can do this. Let's make this a great year. And they do. They continue north, and as they get further north, they're noticing ice pack to one side of them, icebergs on the other side of them, but in front of them, open seas. They continue sailing and continue sailing, and they hit an inlet, like a bay of a land. And while they're there, they kind of reconvene their supplies, they eat some lunch, and they have a real discussion. Now, I want to say that Olaf's father wasn't a Christian. They believed in the gods of old. They believed in Odin and Thor, and they're discussing about a land far to the north of the north wind, as far north as you can go. And that land is the land of the chosen people of God. And they're just discussing it because they're so far north. And his dad's kind of like, what do you say, son? Do you want to go? And Olaf, I think, was a little bit reserved about it, but his dad was a man that once he conceived of something, it was going to happen. He was going to implement it. And he knew his dad really wanted to, and there were no hardships on the trip yet, so they were like, yeah, let's do this. They had already been on the water for a couple of months, so this wasn't some short, they just went a little bit north. They've been living on the water for a couple of months, bringing in their catches, looking for interesting finds, and planning to see if they could go further yet. So the decision is made, and they decide to go further yet. As they're sailing north of this land, this inlet that they found, this beautiful inlet, and another thing he does talk about in the book is they are so surprised that the air is warm. It's warm outside. The island itself does not have timber on it, but there is timber strewn about the island, which they probably think, where did that come from? There aren't trees for a bit out here. How did this get here? They don't really talk about it. They do say that there's vegetation on the island. The air is warm and the seas were good. So let's do this. Let's go further north. And that's what they do. They go further north, and one night Olaf decides he's going to take a nap. His dad's going to stay up and stay watch. And as he's sleeping, he gets awoken by jostling. He's getting slashed around and just pushed around on the boat. And he wakes up and he is shocked to see that his dad also fell asleep. Not only that, but there is a crazy blizzard and they're getting thrown around, and he fears for his life a little bit. He's like, this is not good. This is not good at all. They bring down their mast. their sails and they kind of steer through the storm. They make it in the end, but they took damage to their boat and they lost a lot of supplies. And after the storm is done, he's kind of worried, like their water is gone, most of their food is gone. And his dad's telling him, worry not, son, just get undressed, let's dry our clothes, and we're going to figure out a way around this. So that's what he does. He gets undressed. He decides he's going to wash his face. And as he's washing his face, he realizes that the water isn't salty. It's fresh. Both of them are dumbfounded. Like, we're in the middle of the ocean. How in the world is this happening? There should not be fresh water here. So they refill their water bottles, and I'm sure in their heart of hearts, they believe that the gods are with them and they're providing for them, and it's a sign for them to go further. So they fill up their water jugs and they continue. And they sail and they sail. And then one day, his father starts yelling, Olaf, Olaf, look at what I'm seeing. What is this? And at first, their minds cannot comprehend what they are looking at. They think it's another planet, but it's huge. And it's dark red and fiery and smoky at the same time. And they're just kind of dumbfounded by it, and they follow it. And as they are following it, they realize more and more that the sun, our sun, the sun that they're used to, is behind them and disappearing, and the sun that they're going towards is there. And that's what happens. They follow this river that they're on into this area of a river where there is land and there is a dull red sun. They also noticed that their compass had been acting weird. They said it was acting drunk a little bit, sticking to the glass, doing things that their compass normally wouldn't do. And they come to this land off this river that they're traveling on, and they are shocked to see the size of the trees. Trees that dwarf the sequoias in California, trees so immense that they can't even comprehend that this is something that grows on Earth. And while they're marveling at the nature, the abundance of these enormous trees, a ship comes up to them. Now, mind you, this is 1829. These men had no concept of electricity. I'm not saying it wasn't invented. I'm just saying common people didn't have it. Most definitely people where he was from did not have it. I want to say that he grew up in Stockholm, but he does say that he had never seen anything like this. So a ship comes up, a massive ship, not like the little vessel that they are on. Men come down, sail out to them on a dinghy, invite them onto the ship, and they follow. They don't feel threatened by them, but they are again taken aback by the enormity of the people that come to meet them. They're giants, 12 to 15 feet. They're extremely large people with a fair but ruddy complexion and beards that are cropped short. They go onto the ship, and while they're on the ship, they meet more of the people of the ship, and they are kind of hosted by a family. And the family takes them in, shows them compassion, and kind of teaches them their language, their culture, and about the land. He also says the women were also enormous in nature, not as tall as the men. They were about 10 to 12 feet with a much more delicate complexion than the men, but they all seemed very kind-hearted and very giving and accepting of them. And they were very interested in Olaf and his father. So while on the ship, he meets the captain, other crew members of the ship. He gets hosted by this family. Well, he and his father are hosted by a family, and they stay with them for some time. So he and his father stay with this ship for some time. And while they're on the ship, there are a couple of things that they notice. There is illumination coming from the ship. The ship makes no sound as it travels. And at 95, Olaf looks back on his life and believes that it's some form of electricity, but when he's on the ship, he doesn't understand it, but he's fascinated by it. And another thing that he learns is of the dull red sun that he's seeing. They call it the Smokey God, and they do worship this sun inside in their inner world. They believe that it gives them everything, and he's also fascinated by that. It's suspended in the center of a great vacuum in the earth, and it stays in place by a force or a power that draws and repels it at the same time. Like, he doesn't understand that's how he comes up with, that's how he describes what he's seeing or what he is, exposed to there. So they spend time with these tall people. They learn of the worshiping of the great clouds of night, part of the smoky sun. And they sail to some more strange lands within the inner earth. They sail to another city, and in this city, he realizes that these are a people of agriculture. They grow grains, fruit, vegetation, much like we see on the other side, on our side of the world, but they are enormous in scope. The grapes, he describes the grapes as being the size of an orange, each grape the size of an orange, and everything else to suit. Like, it's just much bigger than anything we have here. There's vegetation everywhere, and at a certain point, during the trip, he's learning of these cities that are in the inner world as he's traveling through some of them, and he hears of one, Eden. Eden is the city that is, he doesn't say it like this, but I imagine it's almost like a capital city for these people. And he is invited by some emissaries that come, interview he and his father, and they invite them to Eden. So during the invite, they are questioned thoroughly and extensively about everything that they know, what they've known about these people, what the outer world is like. They're very interested in the compass. And he and his father they want to answer everything. They're also interested in everything about the people that they're meeting. So they go through all the questions, they answer everything as honestly and best as they can, and then they're invited to meet the great high priest of Eden. They travel to Eden, and when they get there, they realize that the city is a land that has 4 rivers converging through it, almost like they're going through at the cardinal directions, north, east, south, and west. In the center of the city, there's a large temple. The temple seemed to be geared towards music and arts. They have gold everywhere. Everything is embellished in gold. And it's not just this city, but he does bring it up in the city. He says everywhere in this land, windowsills, door frames, everything is embellished in gold. Gold is a very prominent feature in the way they decorate everything there. So they meet this high priest ruler, and he goes through and he questions them again about everything they know. And he's very down to earth and patient and interested in everything, including the compass. Again, they're very interested in the compass. And as they look at the compass, it's still pointing direct north, and it's still flat up, pushed up against the glass of the compass holder, which he and his father think is super strange because in their heads, they must have gone across that threshold past true north. They must be somewhere further going down south on the other side, but it still shows true north, or some funky way the compass shows north in its drunken way. And the ruler then asked them, do you want to stay with us? We invite you to stay with us if you like. And Olaf's father answers for both of them, and he says, I do want to stay with you, and I want to learn about your people, and I want to learn about your lands. I want to learn about your culture, your arts, and your music. I want to learn about all of it, but then I want to go home because I have a wife at home, and I know that she is missing me and our only child. And the ruler doesn't seem taken aback, but he seems genuinely worried for him, and he says, this is an extremely, extremely dangerous trip. I don't know that you're going to make it back home, but if you make it home, I don't think you'll ever make it back here. If that is what you want, I will honor your wishes, and I have your boat, and your boat has been fixed, and you can go whenever you're ready to go, but I think you should strongly consider staying with us. So at that point, he's kind of goes back to his host family, and they're kind of like given a tour of the inner world. They see different cities and places, always captivated by the beauty of it all, how ornately decorated it is and gilded with gold, the amount of vegetation and the sheer veracity and size of it, and how good the people are. And while they're on this tour, they're kind of like little rock stars because the dad is always questioned. He does a presentation for the people. He's made rudimentary maps. He's telling them about our world, and they both realize that these people know more about our world than we know about them. They know they understand a lot of the continents, the land masses, what's up above. We had no idea about these guys at all. Unless you go from the accounts of old and you believe that God's chosen people from the stories of Odin and Thor is the true north where they are now, which is really an inner world. It's just crazy when you think about all of it. So they do. They go this tour of the world and land. And after about 4 years, they fully understand the language. They understand the culture. They feel like they've seen what they came to see, and they're ready to go back. And he lets them know, yeah, it's time. It's time for us to go back. We need to go back and get my wife. But I'm telling you, we'll be back in 2 years. We are coming back to this place. And they, again, warned him, like, this is a treacherous and dangerous trip. Please consider staying. And he and his father are like, no, we're going to go home, but don't worry, we'll be back. And they do. They make their way out, and they're on the water for a while. They're brought back to the river that they came in on. And as they get back kind of to the point that they stopped, they see our sun on the outside again. The dark red sun on this side, our sun on this side. And as they sail towards our sun, they feel the chill of the air. In this inner world, it was more of a constant temperature. It rained once a day. I don't know that they had seasons like we have seasons. And the chill of the air hits them. They're back in the Antarctic or the Arctic, and they are sailing home. And it's a relatively smooth trip until it's not. So he and his father are sailing through, and they're coming through the icebergs again, and all of a sudden they hear an explosion. As they're navigating around all these icebergs, one of them breaks in half behind them, and it shoots their boat up and explodes part of it. And when Olaf wakes up, he's on top of an iceberg. The boat is gone, his dad is gone, and they are nowhere to be seen. He doesn't say how long he's on this iceberg, but he's on there for a good amount of time. And the entire time, it's like he has this nervous panic. He's just striding around the iceberg over and over, looking for any sign of his father at all, knowing he's going to die here. And it doesn't say how long he's there, but one day a whaling vessel comes and sees him, and they rescue him. And while he's on the boat, they're asking him, like, what are you doing out here? How the hell did you get here? What in the world? And he tells the captain his tale of sailing to the inner world with his father, what he saw, what he learned. And as he's finishing, the captain promptly confines him to a cell because this guy is crazy as crazy can be. He gets put in a cell. And as he's in the cell, Olaf is just thinking like, oh, I can't believe this is happening. All I did was tell the truth. But it's obvious nobody wants to have anything to do with him because they think he's Looney Tunes, And I don't think that they were exactly, they didn't view people with mental health issues the same way we view people nowadays. So yeah, he was getting locked up, and they were going to bring him to port and make sure he was confined once they got there. So he rethinks his strategy in this cell, and he thinks, I better make something up and just tell him that I was on the iceberg for a little bit. The loss of my father jarred and shocked me, and I said some crazy things that I didn't mean. And that's what he does. He tells this to the captain. The captain reluctantly lets him out of the cell, telling him, like, you better not say any more crazy shit, dude, because you're going to go right back. So the captain brings him back to Stockholm. Once in Stockholm, he decides he's going to go and find his mom. Well, it turns out his mom had passed away the year before, and the estate was divvied up between her relatives. And he goes and he looks for people associated with the estate and wants to find out what's going on. And he also wants to tell a story. He wants to find someone that he trusts, a family member, a friend, somebody he can tell his story to. And he does. He finds his uncle. He tells the entire thing to his uncle. His uncle listens intently and tells him, if we really want to make this trip back there, we're probably going to have to talk to some merchants in town to see how we're going to fund this. And why don't we go tomorrow and talk to them and smooth out the details of it all? And Olaf is just excited and happy that, one, someone is believing him. 2, he's going to go back and see the wonders of this intense inner world. Well, he goes back, he's making his speech to all the merchants, and his uncle is just over there signing away paperwork. Lo and behold, his uncle has him committed. He's committed to another hospital, I think an insane asylum, where he spends 28 years of his life. He talks about it in the book a couple of times, how that is so hard. It was so hard for him to be around truly insane people and to have people feel like he was truly insane, and how hard that was. He maintained his innocence throughout the entire 28 years, and eventually he gets out. Once he's out, he realized that he's almost 50 years old, or he is 50 years old, and the only account of him in this world is of him being insane. And he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know where to go. So he goes back to the one thing he knows. He goes back to fishing. He works for companies or men of that time on their fishing boats for about 5 years, saving every single penny he has, because he has nobody. He has nothing. So he saves every penny he has, and he amasses enough to buy his own boat, eventually his own fleet. He does that for another 20 years or so, and eventually he decides it's time to retire, and he sells everything off. And with that money, he moves to America. And he ends up in, I want to say, rural Illinois or Iowa. He spends about a decade there, and then eventually moves to California, LA area. He's older. He's never really had family or friends. He tells no one of his story, because the few times that he did tell anyone, his life became a shambles, and he spends his days in quiet seclusion taking care of his garden. It's so sad when you think about all of it. It's just tragic, you know what I mean? Until one day, someone walking by notices his garden, and they strike up a conversation. Olaf is, I think, 94 years old at this point in time, and I think he's waiting. He's waiting for somebody to show any interest, or even just acknowledge that he exists so that he can tell his story again. This man happened to be a reporter for a newspaper, I believe, and he shares his story. The man's name was Willis George Emerson, and upon Olaf's death, he publishes his account, and it's called The Smokey God, or A Voyage to the Inner World. And it's just, to me, it's fascinating. It's a quick read. It's only 100 pages. There's no extra filler or, extra words to read. It gets right to the point. It just tells of his account, his life, what his ordeals that he went through. And yeah, it's fascinating. So I'm going to do a couple of things with later videos that have to do with this concept of the inner world. Maybe an inner Eden was Eden inside of the earth, and when Adam and Eve were kicked out, they were kicked to the outer world. I don't know. Let's kind of go through some stuff and see where this fascinating journey takes us. All right, thanks for watching. And also, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe.